Sometimes that happens, then everything beeps, like my phone, I turn everything on, like it starts, everything starts buzzing. Yeah. Yes, and I should learn that.
Turning it on silent.
That clock may be a minute slow. Great. All right, I'm going to call to order the Albany Unified School District Board of Education board conversation on the parcel tax. This is a special meeting in which we're going to see if we can make some headway discussing the parcel tax proposed for November, the November ballot. May I have a roll call, please?
Member Rosenbaum?
Here.
Member Lowe?
Here.
Member Black?
Here.
Vice President Maris?
Here.
President Knight?
Here. And our agenda is extremely short. It's just the conversation, but I just want to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. And I thought that I'd start this evening just by making a couple of comments on timing. And so if we proceed as the board has voted to do, which is to place a ballot measure on the November ballot, we have to think about getting the specific ballot language ready by a certain deadline. Now, the city deadline may be, I think, as late as August. I'm not exactly sure. However, a community committee has formed, as we know, and is very active and really, and has said to me that they need the summer at least to really get rolling and to produce some kind of effective community outreach. So to do that, I think that we need to have our plan set and ideally the ballot language set by June. I think would be a reasonable goal. And I also happen to know that 2 board members will not be present at the June 22nd meeting. I'm one of them. So really the first meeting in June would be the best time to approve this.
I will be missing the first meeting in June.
The first meeting in June. Well, we'll deal with that when we come to it. It just makes it all more urgent to get some agreement soon. So let's just, for example, back up from the June 22nd meeting. We would need to have clear decisions about what would go into the ballot language by the second meeting in May. So really we need to be looking, making those decisions, because we need to be looking at a draft of it by the second meeting in May. So we really need to be making decisions with probably 2 meetings from now. We have to pretty well finalize what we're going to do. So given that, I think what I'll do is we have a couple of presentations this evening. We have Teresa from Trammatola Advisors and I guess also Rebecca from the Community Committee, which met last night, and they have some recommendations for us. And we may also have, is there anything from staff as well, or do we have?
No, I think that...
Okay, that's great. So if we... All right. So maybe if Teresa, if you don't mind beginning, we'll just get a bit more information and kick this off.
Is this being recorded?
Are we taping? Yeah.
Excellent.
Probably a question I should have asked. Is it being recorded? I'm Teresa Geringer from Trammatola Advisors, and I have met with a couple of you or seen a couple of you at different functions. I'm also on the school board in Lafayette, California, for the Lafayette Elementary School District, and here tonight, though, in my capacity with Trammatola Advisors. But I will share that it's interesting to be on this side instead of sitting over there. So, and I do want to acknowledge that we have had meetings, both conversations with Rebecca and Holly and other members of the committee, and Larry Trammatola and I both have attended larger or at-large meetings with the committee. And so you should be very happy. I know as a board member I would be much more inclined to move forward with something knowing that I have full community and grassroots support behind. So I think that we can acknowledge that you do have that. In front of you, I did bring a PowerPoint presentation, which basically is just to frame the discussion. It's not new information. You already received all the poll results. You have lots of information in front of you. I will tell you that the calendar that or the timeline that I provided, I will just point out very early that I, for some reason, missed a May 27th meeting. And so if you look at this timeline, I will send a revised one to you, assuming that you intend to move forward, and we can definitely meet the goals that you have in terms of filing. The earliest, my understanding from Alameda County, is that the July 14th is when the nomination period opens. August 8th is the deadline to file, to your point, Jonathan, or President Knight, about the timeline, so we can work to make sure, and you have plenty of time to get that done and to get a resolution and to have it actually reviewed a couple of times in public. So, okay, so tonight, as you're beginning to discuss this, none of this will come as a surprise. The things that you need to, now that you've decided on the timing of the election, is to have a good plan. What will you actually be using the proceeds for? Since it's a renewal, you actually have a very good plan already in place on what programs will be covered. You will need to look at the term or the length of the measure and decide what that will be. And then, of course, amount and structure. So will you go for a straight renewal? I'm throwing this out even though I think I know what direction it will be without an increase, or renewal with an increase. And just very quickly, I know Larry spoke to you with Tim McClarney on Skype, but Larry in person on the different recommendations based on the polling and based on where you are right now. We're looking at continuing to fund the existing programs. Of course, in the language and the ballot statement, there may be some tweaking based on the poll results from your original ballot language to pass the original measure. We're suggesting that the board consider a term of from 5 to 7 years, and I'm happy to answer questions about that, but it's in line with keeping with the local control funding formula will be, we hope, and based on the plan of it, implemented, by the 2020-2021 school year, and then also hopefully with the legislation that's going through relative to providing clarity around Baricus, or however you pronounce that correctly, lawsuit, you'll be able to have some range within that time frame. And so that 5 to 7 year period allows that. And then on the amount, which I will trust will be the part that the other two will likely be very easy to go through and to make a decision on that. But we are recommending that renewal within that range of 60 to 120. And you will remember in looking back at your poll results that while there was support at $125, that stayed pretty steady, there was also tax rate sensitivity. And so that's why in looking at the recommendations, we have had that range. And I'm also, again, happy to answer questions as you go forward. And just as the very last slide that you have in your PowerPoint is just what we look at as the basis or the plan or basics of success. You need a really strong plan. You need to really understand who your voters are, and then you need the resources. I think that you have all of those in place, and again, back to acknowledging the committee that is ready to go and advocate for whatever measure you put on the ballot. You have time to do that. You have the resources in terms of people. So thank you for letting me present this overview.
Thank you very much.
So electoral scenarios, is that just the schedule of the?
Yeah, so you've really already addressed a lot of that. The other piece of it is to, make sure, and because of your previous elections and that, you have information about your voter demographics, but you just want to make sure you know what the plan is and who you're delivering the message to. And your polling that you did with True North Research also basically simulates a campaign structure, if you will, a whole campaign and election cycle. And so that section there about electoral scenarios and the demographics is what that would be including.
Teresa,
Yeah.
in your experience, would it make any kind of a difference in approval rate if we came up with a number more like 119 than 120? It seems to work very well for marketing.
I think that as long as it's in that range, that you'll be fine. I will tell you that in looking at the actual polling data, looking at how it drops, that tax sensitivity causes it to drop as it goes up higher, we're actually most comfortable in the 90-95 range, even given that you have a really strong, committee. But I wouldn't say that, I would say maybe from a messaging, it's 119, but I think at that point you're increasing it, by a number of dollars a month. And so, yeah. I don't know if the Kmart and the Target, marketing scenario applies.
Yeah, well, I was wondering.
Strategy.
Because, they've done studies where they found things like if something that's costs 29 cents sells in larger numbers than something that's 25 cents.
Yeah.
Not logical.
It can't hurt. And I would rather hear 119 than 190.
So in looking at your polling data, for the 60, the 96, and the 125 increase over the current rate, there's enough we get 62%, but if the not sures all go our way, we clearly, even half of them, we get our 67%.
If you assume that all of the not sures are with you.
Half
right.
of them
But
will give us 5%, that'll give us 67%.
Right,
Yeah.
but if you also look at, the 62, so the 73 at $60 is soft support. The 62 is soft, and it stays 62 if you're at the 125 or the $96. But if you look, the people who are definitely with you, you don't have to you don't have to convince them. They are with you as long as you can get them to vote. It's 45 at the $96. It drops by 8 percentage points. So it's just a matter of, do you have will all your yeses, strong yeses vote? I believe with a strong campaign, you can get most of them to vote. So we can play with the statistics, but they're a snapshot in time, and it does show some drop off.
Plus there's a margin of error on any of those
Sure.
statistics.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you.
Could I ask one last thing? You said you could say a little bit about the choice of range of 5 to 7 years. I mean, other than being in keeping with the funding picture that we have, is there a reason based on the poll to think 5 to 7 years is a good extension period for people to digest?
I think that, yes, based on the poll, there is a reason that in that 5 to 7 years that's a good, solid with the voters. I think also coupled with the realities of our education funding situation and with the sort of current state of everything, that 5 to 7 is good as well. We wouldn't, when we're looking at Trey Matola and True North, recommend going, longer and not putting your community through going shorter.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Okay.
Great.
And I will still be here. I look forward to hearing the conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Would you like to come up, Rebecca? Great.
Good evening, board members. Rebecca Long. I'm co-chairing the Community Parcel Tax Committee with Holly White. And as was mentioned, we did meet last night and had a good conversation. I think it was, we didn't kind of come into it with, too much preconceived notions. In fact, I'll be honest, I kicked off the meeting saying, I'm nervous. I feel like when you look at the polling numbers, as was mentioned, you're only in sort of the safe zone around 60. But having said that, I think as we all kind of went around and talked about the different pros and cons, I think that the biggest risk, quite frankly, to doing something lower is that you don't have an energized group of volunteers that feel really good about, going out and that we're really helping our school district, because at $60 increase, we're still losing ground relative to where we are. And so, I think that that's a big consideration. Since we are such a small community, when you have a lot of very organized, motivated volunteers, we really believe that we can make a difference and we can push the needle. And there is definitely some wiggle room in those numbers. There's a pretty large sum of folks that are on the fence that we think, with a very organized and dedicated, volunteer campaign, we can move them. So where we landed, and we did reach consensus, was that we would like to recommend that you consider a $119 dollar increase above where we are. So that would be a $278 dollars per year for the extension of Measure I. We also thought about different ways that might be framed in talking to voters. That's less than $24 a month total. The increase is less than $10 a month. We felt that those were just sort of messaging points that make it seem tenable, hopefully. We did talk about the duration as well, and I think especially since we admit that going for 119 is somewhat aggressive, we felt that it would be prudent to have a shorter time frame, and so we landed on 6 years. It's not too short that, we're right back at it. It also would put the renewal in a presidential election cycle, which, tends to be a strong time to put a measure on the ballot. So we thought that was another selling point. But certainly having a shorter term will probably make it more palatable to those who might otherwise be on the fence. So that's really the recommendation that we wanted to put forward. We haven't talked a whole lot where the focus of our discussion is about what should be in the measure. I think we would agree that, it really should be continuing the types of programs that have already been listed for Measure I, given that, we're not really talking about increased funding. And one more thing I would say about the 119 is that as we kind of crunch the numbers, another thing that we're thinking about is looking at not just Measure I in isolation, but also with Measure J. And now because of the Baricus decision and your hands are tied and you can't do the cost of living adjustment, you're actually losing roughly $90,000 a year because you're frozen. And so what we get with the 119 is it actually gives an extra $90,000 more or less. And so you're basically steady. Over time, that's going to continue to go down, obviously, if you can't raise Measure J, but in the near term, in the 6 years, you're pretty much holding steady. So we thought that was another really nice selling point, that if you pass this measure, you're going to hold local dedicated funding steady for the district. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So that would be a major selling point. We would be breaking even, and we'd have to really explain that out. Or you would have to really explain that.
Right.
Questions, Alan?
To me, there are a number of issues in terms of how much money we're really going to provide for our school programs. We currently have a structural budget deficit of about $1.2 million. The public should realize that as well. And as well as the Baracus issue and how we have to charge a flat rate for commercial as well as residential. To even get, and if you're going for the $119 extra per year, how much of that is really going to give us an opportunity to go after the priorities of restoration of program? We still have program to restore. Seems to me there are a lot of issues to cover in the education program for the public, and brochures and talking and.
Right. I mean, I think we all wish that we could be, here saying, hey, we think we should go for, a much higher parcel tax that could close the structural deficit. But, I think there's a lot of pieces we don't know, right? We don't know exactly how much funding we're going to get from the state. Maybe it will look much better when we're all standing here in June. But I think the main message is if we don't pass this, we will be looking at, potential cuts to programs, and we have to stay, stable with our local share of the funding. We can't predict right now, but, maybe we'll be in a better position in June. But we would just kind of, the way we're thinking of it right now is, you've got a variety of funding sources. The local portion is, what is it, about 15% total, and you don't want that to go down.
Pat, go ahead.
I think that you make some good points, Alan, But I went to some of the parcel tax meetings as you did, and I think what I see here is that there are details and problems and issues with our funding that you're very aware of, but I think it's going to be part of the Parcel Tax Committee and campaign's job to decide how best to explain what you will use the money for. And I listened to their discussion and also some of Mr. Tramatola's advice about how people react to too many details and negative facts. And so I respect, what you're saying about all the intricacies of what's unknown, but I think the point that she's making is very good. It's very clear. She's trying to give a clear but honest message about what can really be accomplished. And you don't want to overpromise, of course. And so I respect that. You're not going to say, oh, we're suddenly going to be able to do all these things, when the reality, at least as far as we can tell now, doesn't really allow us to say that. So I think it's, I understand your point, but I have confidence that they're going to understand how to work with the community.
Yeah, I just hope they'll consider some of the points I made. Hopefully they'll know a little more about the local control funding money that's available after the May budget revise and maybe on into June, so.
One would hope, but we also need to make a point of what might be lost, because we can't count on the state. So just breaking even means we keep the things that we value. Gain, we don't lose.
Right, and we talked about that. If it turns out that there's a windfall in the May revise, and if suddenly our structural deficit's gone, that complicates the message a little bit. But I think what we feel is a strong message is, look, the state budget, Sacramento, it's up and down. We know that with the cycle of the economy, we need to make sure that our local share of funding is stable and steady, and we can count on it.
Yeah, and I think it's another way to look at it is that a lot of the things listed, I was trying to pull this up and I don't have it in front of me, but a lot of the things listed under both Measure I and J as spending priorities are things that we've actually continued to do. Class size is in there, and we just authorized the spending of a certain amount to keep class sizes a little smaller in the fall for kindergarten through third grade. So I think we're actually doing these things, but we're hitting the point where we won't be able to do them much longer, because we really have that structural deficit. If we lose another 1.2 million a year, then so we are doing those priorities, and it isn't deceptive to say that that we're going to pass a measure for this one thing and end up spending it on something else, because I think we really are focused on those things. Thanks very much, Rebecca. Appreciate
Sorry,
it.
to still have I think what Pat is saying is correct, but the more you know about what affects the taxpayer, the better position you'll be in to select the really key important issues that won't confuse the taxpayers. So, I attended your meeting last night, and the people at that table, here's Gary, he had some really good insights as well. I think you really understand what the issues are, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for those of you who've attended over the last few months. It's been great to have you all there.
Actually, that reminds me of one thing I wanted to ask, because I did attend one meeting, and there have been several others. I'm just wondering, what's your sense of the strength of the community organization? How many people are you getting, and have people stepped up to say, we're going to hit the phone banks and we're ready to go? What's your sense of that?
Well, we have about 50 plus, give or take, maybe 55 or so people who have signed up to the Google group. So, whenever we have a meeting, we send them emails, give them updates. So those are people who have clearly, at this early stage, shown an interest and have said, just let us know when you need us. I'm ready to be involved. I would say, not that many people have been coming to the meetings, but I think that's because it's in this planning phase. And once it gets more kind of grassroots, campaigning, I think we're going to see a lot more participation. But that does kind of segue nicely into why we really would like your help making a decision before the end of the school year, because what we want to do is kind of share some information with parents, in the sort of end of year packets and folders to say, hey, this is coming, please sign up, to this email list so that we can notify you, because we're going to need your help come, September, October, and we can really hit the ground running once they come back. But yeah, we're, right now, I can't say we have, an army of 300 volunteers, but I'm pretty confident that it'll be there when we need it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that asks the question of, moving forward with the schedule. And
Right.
Schedule's missing the second meeting in May. Maybe we can have it done by then. Since it says May 13th, second reading of ballot measure, and have
I have
action.
a copy of something that I don't have, because I don't have a copy of the schedule. Is there a
Well,
separate
there's
handout?
this schedule. Didn't get this?
I didn't get one of these.
From,
Do you happen to have an extra
Teresa.
one?
yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so exactly, we can
So if
can
we
schedule-
have
those
second
two
reading
meetings.
by May 13th, then we're all
Right.
here at the second meeting in May. We could be ready to go.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's, essentially what we have to decide is the term, the amount, which means with or without an increase, and then what will be mentioned in the measure. A very, I don't know if we want to maybe go down the line and say what we're each thinking about that at this point, or do we need
What do you
some
mean
more
by what's
information?
mentioned? Yeah. You mean what the list of,
So the list of priorities and programs.
do we have the list of
I was
programs?
trying to pull it up, actually, copy of
So the
Measure I.
actual ballot language?
Ballot language.
From the last one. Okay, thank you.
Maybe we can, get that sent out, and,
Yeah.
by the next meeting, we'll have a chance to go over what should
Mhm.
not have on there, what should we add.
Right.
Thinking about, basically, we'll have same money to spend, given we don't know about LCFF yet.
Right. And things have changed in a few years. It could well be it needs to be updated a
But we
bit.
can even say, if LCFF comes through with more money than we expect, then we can do more things.
I don't think we should.
No, I mean, what I'm worried about is if there is money on the table later on, and then
Yeah.
folks who are out there campaigning, I mean, they have
Mhm.
maybe a slight crutch, because,
It's
oh, wait a second, we don't have to pass this because there's money. Go on, Ben.
No, that's a good point. I think we would need some advice
Yeah.
about that kind of language in
Mm-hmm.
the actual ballot.
Yeah, and I'm not holding my breath to see the money.
Mhm.
The other one, the existing
Peter's
one,
nodding.
was sold as an emergency parcel tax with the promise that when the money was restored from the state, we would let it expire. So do we have the same promise in this one? Or is it just a straight 6-year tax?
Well, my feeling is that we would love to hear your views, but I just want to, I'll just throw out there that it's pretty clear that the money from the state, it seems unlikely that it will truly restore it exactly as it's planned to restore. It's far too sensitive to economic uncertainty, and there may be a beautiful 7-year plan, but I think I've mentioned before that we haven't had an economic recovery more than 5 years long since World War II. We're in the 3rd year of this one, so to expect that we're going to be 7 years from now still following that trajectory that's projected seems unlikely.
But there'll be people in the community, I mean, Paul's point is well taken. There are still folks who remember that it was declared an emergency and, they're expecting no more taxes. So, and there are a lot of people who, like, wait a second, it's never been restored. So.
Oh, thank you, Marlon. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thanks. Rebecca Long, co-chair of the Parcel Tax Committee. I don't think that we think it should be framed as an emergency at this point. I mean, it clearly has become part of the baseline budget. It's hard to imagine how, we would continue to provide excellent education in Albany if we were to lose $1.3 million. So, I think we would recommend against kind of framing it in that context. I think it should be framed as this is, a temporary tax that is going to provide additional local funding or continue the local funding that has been going to the schools.
Well, what you will hear from people is, well, you always do this, you say it's a temporary tax, and then you make it permanent. So why are we even saying it's temporary if we plan on renewing it again in 6 years?
So I would love to see it more as something that this is part of the permanent Albany commitment to the best education possible.
I think a good response to why we're not recommending that it's permanent is partly in the context of the restructuring of the state's funding, right? Because the LCFF is a 8-year trajectory, and so within 6 years, we'll have a much better sense of where things are. We'll be able to tell, do we really need it? What is the appropriate level? And so, there's a lot of unstable pieces right now. There's the lawsuit that is forcing us to change the structure. So it's not a good time to lock in a new permanent source. I think that is how you would explain that. But if someone says, well, can I count on this going away? I think you would be honest and say, there will probably need to be something that raises this level of funding, but we want to provide voters with accountability. That's why we're going to come back to you and ask you again in 6 years. But no, that we're not going to promise, this is it and you won't see us again.
But I think the point that Paul made is, I don't know about selling it as an emergency, but as a 6-year plan.
Right.
And
And a renewal.
A renewal, yes.
That's expiring.
A renewal of something, yeah.
Maintaining the funds
Yeah.
that were provided by the one that is expiring,
Yeah.
more or less.
Right. Teresa?
So one of the things that I did just want to, before you, I know you have another board meeting in just a little bit, is that in terms of writing the ballot language and deciding exactly what programs will go into that, on the timeline, if you decide, to give direction to the superintendent, to go forward and say, we would like you to come back with a parcel tax resolution and ballot language, for our April 22nd meeting, we would work with the superintendent to develop that language. And those programs, we will come back and you will, potentially tweak the 75-word ballot statement, but they'll be aligned with what you currently have, but also with what your polling said. That was important to the voters in the community as well. And so I just wanted to, before you decided to write language here or felt you had to write language here tonight, that will come back to you if you give direction to the superintendent. And we'll have all of those elements in terms of term and amount, renewal, and what level of increase.
So we'll
and
see
you'll
it.
still have opportunities to, at that meeting, look at it and, say, okay, I think that we need to revisit the amount or we need to revisit the term. So I don't feel you have to make strong decisions tonight. You just need to provide direction to the superintendent to move that forward.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we're being asked to propose that
Yeah.
we see a draft ballot measure by April 22nd. I would also say we should all take a look at the old ballot language, which maybe you can send it to us so we don't have to go over it today.
Should I
And,
just read these items?
Yeah,
Since we have a few minutes and I have them in front of me,
Okay.
I can just read the list of
Sure.
what Measure I includes.
Pen and pencil?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get this sent to everybody, right? But I'll just read out
We've all
loud
got
the
it
items let's see. So the California budget crisis has so far cost Albany Unified $4.2 million, 13% of the school budget. Despite these drastic and unprecedented cuts, Albany schools have a balanced budget for the current school year, but the sacrifices are enormous and heartbreaking. Class sizes have been increased in elementary and high school. Teachers are working without classroom aides. Sounds familiar, right? Assistant principal positions have been cut, jeopardizing campus safety. School library services are reduced. Academic counselors struggle to keep up with 8% higher caseloads. Elementary music and art courses have been cut. Access to elective courses have been drastically reduced at the middle and high schools. District administration has been cut by $200,000. Teachers have accepted pay cuts and higher workloads to save money. The community has rallied to donate $330,000, allowing some electives in athletics and art programs to continue this year, but the limited funding is very short term. And so that's sort of the preamble, and presumably the idea is to restore some of those cuts, which are ongoing. So, but yeah, I think we should begin to think about providing some direction in the next few minutes. So do people want to say how they feel about the community proposal, whether we should modify it in any way? Maybe we could go down the line and just get people's thoughts on that. Do you want to start, Ron?
Sure,
Yeah.
we have, yeah, I think we should move ahead. You know, these folks did a lot of work and a lot of thought. So I've already said, you know, I propose that we base our draft proposal, which we can go over and change at the next meeting, based on the community's input, $119 and 6 years.
Pat, what do you think?
Thank you to the committee for your work. I agree.
You know, initially, I felt that we passed an emergency parcel tax, and that the state was beginning to restore funding, and we should give people a break and prove that we were serious about it not being a permanent parcel tax and just let it expire. And the community kind of rose up and said, we want another parcel tax, and we even want more. So I say, let the community run with it, and I like their proposal, and I think we should go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
So I'm really impressed with your commitment to maintaining and restoring, improving revenue to the school district so we can maintain our programs. I see incredible commitment by parents and the public to be what we're proud of right now, which is our schools. Let's keep them. And you've shown that so well, that community is behind this. So keep people in the community, and I think you'll get the rest of them. So ballot language is critical. I think you've started on it. We've given you some suggestions of what the issues are. I believe you'll flush those out so that we have a really good ballot language that isn't too complicated, but it's the essential issues on why we're restoring and increasing the funding. So thank you.
So, and so you're supporting, in terms of the term and the amount, you're in agreement with the proposal from the community committee? 6 years and...
Yeah, I have another perspective on this as well, which isn't going to sell, but parents spend $20,000 or $30,000 a year for private schools. And we're getting such a bargain here. I think we could go for $1,000. It wouldn't sell, but I think there's certainly...
Alan has grandchildren.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
It sells to
Education.
parents and grandparents.
I mean, public education is so important to a democracy and a healthy community. We should be willing to spend a lot. Well, thank you.
That was a yes.
That sounds like a yes to me. So, well, I'm in agreement with my fellow board members in terms of the amount and the term of it, and I think we'll probably leave the details of what programs we want to mention in the ballot language for a future time, but we could start with what's in Measure I. I don't think there was any disagreement with that as kind of a starting point, and then work from there.
I think we're pretty close to the same list.
It's
yeah.
a lot of it, yeah.
Sadly, I think that's...
Most of it.
Right.
There might be some, some small additions.
Yeah, and I think we should try to, this is a good time to reflect on that, so I think as we go forward, we should do that. But I guess the direction then to the superintendent would be to bring back some ballot language draft for the next meeting, April 22nd.
We'll get it done.
Class
Thank you.
size, aids, music, art, elementary. It's all the same.
That's what the community will get.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, that allows us then, I think, to adjourn this meeting a little early unless there are any final comments from board members.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
It's great work.
We look
Thank
forward to
you.
hearing the draft language. Thank you.
All right, so we'll start our regular meeting in about 7 minutes, and this meeting's adjourned.